Clark sat in his car at the trailhead, engine off, hands still on the wheel. He had driven 2 hours to get here. The doctor had written something on a slip of paper a week earlier. The word outside was underlined twice, like a polite threat. So here he was. He had blocked the morning on his calendar, told his manager he might be slow to respond. He had even worn the new boots his sister had given him months ago, the ones with the price tag still tucked in the lining. He was 27, running on coffee, micro naps, and a persistent, dull ache behind his eyes. Nothing was wrong, technically. He had a job. He had an apartment with one window facing a brick wall. He paid his bills. He went to the gym sometimes. His family thought he was doing fine because when they asked, he said he was doing fine, and he had become good at saying it. The tiredness was the kind that built up over years. It came from carrying small, unfinished things on your back every day, until your shoulders started to forget what straight felt like. He had hoped the forest would fix it. He got out of the car. He gave his hamstrings a half-hearted tug, feeling suddenly self-conscious in the empty parking lot. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the trail map. Then he checked his email. Then he checked the trail map again, because his eyes had not really seen it the first time. The first sign he passed had a list of rules. No littering, no fires, no loud music. Clark read it twice. He had a habit of reading rules even when they did not apply to him. It felt useful somehow. He started walking. For the first few minutes, the trees were just decoration. He noticed the temperature, the smell of pine, the crunch under his boots, in the same way you might notice the song playing in a coffee shop while you write an email. Present, but background. He was already calculating how long the loop would take, whether he could be back in the city by 3, whether the office Slack would be quiet enough on a Saturday to let him sneak a few replies. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He stopped. He pulled it out. The signal icon showed one weak, flickering bar. An email notification popped up. Just a sender's name and a vague subject line from his manager. But when he tapped it, the screen only showed an endless loading circle. He read the subject line 3 times. His thumb hovered, swiping down to refresh in a neurotic twitch, staring at the spinning wheel until the screen blurred. Then he put it back in his pocket and started walking again, slightly faster than before. He noticed the speed in his legs. He told himself, "Slow down, slow down." His legs did not seem to be listening. They had a rhythm that had been trained by 1,000 mornings of catching the elevator before the doors closed. He passed a tree with pale bark, the kind he had once seen in a calendar photo at his dentist's office. He took a picture of it. He did not look at the tree. He looked at the screen showing the tree. He pinched to zoom. He decided the lighting was wrong. He kept walking. He plugged in his earbuds. A podcast started playing. A man with a confident voice was explaining how to build morning routines that compound. Clark nodded along. He had listened to this episode before. He had listened to it the way some people pray. About an hour in, the trail widened into a small clearing with a wooden bench. There was an old man sitting on it. The man was not doing anything in particular. He was just sitting. His hands rested on a walking stick and staring at the canopy with the quiet, unshakable intensity of someone who had absolutely nowhere else to be. He did not wear earbuds. He did not have a smartwatch. There was no water bottle in a fancy holster. just a battered green flask beside him on the bench, and a small canvas bag at his feet with a folded newspaper sticking out of it. Clark slowed down out of habit, the kind of habit you develop in offices, where you nod at people you do not know. The old man nodded back. Clark thought about walking past. Then he thought about how he was supposed to be relaxing, and how relaxing people probably sat on benches. So he sat. The old man did not say anything for a while. Clark felt his fingers itch toward his phone. He kept them on his knees. "First time on this trail?" the old man asked eventually. "First time hiking, actually," Clark said. Clark forced a polite, nervous chuckle, instantly regretting opening his mouth. "What brings you out here?" Clark thought about it. He could have said something honest. Instead, he said, "My doctor told me I needed to walk off some stress." The old man chuckled. It was not a mean sound. "That's how a lot of folks get here." They sat in silence again. Clark noticed that the silence felt different next to someone who was comfortable in it. He kept wanting to fill it. He kept stopping himself. After a while, the old man tilted his head toward the trees. "You walking fast?" "I don't think so," Clark said. Then he thought about it. "Maybe a little." "I saw you come around the bend back there. You were moving like you had a train to catch." Clark laughed again, but this time it was a thinner laugh, the kind that came out before he could decide whether to let it. The old man took a sip from his flask. "Can I tell you something, son? You don't have to take it. Just something I noticed." "Sure." "You are moving through the forest, but you are not letting the forest move through you." Clark blinked. He waited for the rest. There was no rest. He turned the sentence over in his head. He tried to make it land. Part of him wanted to argue, and part of him recognized that the part that wanted to argue was usually the part that was right about something it did not want to admit. "With respect," Clark said, "it's easier for you, isn't it?" He gestured at the trees, at the bench, at the old man's quiet hands. "You're, retired? You don't have a Monday." The old man looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, not unkindly. "Son, I had a Monday for 41 years. I had bosses who could ruin a week with one sentence. I had a wife who almost left me twice. I had 3 kids who outgrew their shoes faster than I could afford new ones. Different shape of trouble. Same weight. My doctor talks to me about my heart now the way yours talks to you about your stress. There's always someone you're trying not to let down. Always." Clark looked at the ground. "The trouble," the old man said, "your boss isn't hiding behind that oak tree. You lugged the anxiety up this hill all by yourself. You can't put it down because nobody ever taught you how. So you carry it everywhere, even into a forest on a Saturday morning." Clark wanted to say something. Nothing came. "You don't have to fix it today," the old man said. "Just see it. That's plenty for one walk." He screwed the cap back on his flask and tucked it carefully into his bag. He pushed himself up off the bench with both hands, slow and unembarrassed about being slow. Somewhere down the path a dog barked. The old man chuckled at it like he knew which dog. Then he nodded at Clark once and wandered off down the trail at a pace that looked almost lazy. Except it wasn't lazy at all. It was the pace of a man who had nowhere he was not already. Clark sat on the bench for a long time after he left. He took out his earbuds. He stared at them in his palm. The podcast was still playing inside them, tiny and tinny, a voice telling him how to be a better version of himself. He ripped the earbuds out, held down the power button until the screen died, and shoved the plastic brick deep into his bag. The sudden absence of the podcast left a vacuum. The natural quiet of the forest rushed in so fast it felt almost deafening. He could hear the rush of blood in his own ears. His heart was beating faster, a mild panic rising in his chest, which made no sense. He was sitting on a bench in a forest, and nothing had happened. He just wasn't used to the quiet. After a minute, he let out a long breath. He stood up. Instead of continuing deeper into the woods, he turned his body around, facing the exact path he had just taken. He started walking back. For the first minute, he did not know what to do with himself. His hand kept drifting toward his pocket and finding it empty. His mind scrambled for an inbox to clear or a fire to put out, glitching hard in the sudden quiet. Wednesday's presentation popped up, first, then the unread message from his boss, then a useless little flash of worry about his apartment door. He kept walking. His boots came back first. The soft give of pine needles, the dry snap of leaves, the duller knock when the path turned to packed earth. He had walked for an hour, and he had not heard any of it. Then the wind, moving along the tops of the trees before it ever reached his cheek. There was an order to it. He had never paid attention to that order before. His breath was running hot and quick. He stopped pushing it. It slowed down on its own. He heard birds. He stopped walking and stood still. There were 3 or 4 different ones, talking back and forth, none of them in a hurry. Somewhere deep in him, older than thoughts, something settled. It was just a simple, unwritten rule of the wild. When the birds are singing, the forest is safe. Predators make the woods go quiet. The steady, unbothered chorus above him meant there was nothing hiding in the brush. There was no threat here. He walked on, slower this time. His head had gone quiet. That was the strange part. He could not remember the last time he had walked for 10 minutes without preparing for something. No script for tomorrow's meeting running on loop. None of the usual back and forth he had with his manager in his own skull. There was only a path, and his feet on it, and the wind in the trees, and the birds. He passed the pale-barked tree again, the one he had photographed earlier. He did not take a picture this time. He just looked at it. The bark was not really pale all the way through. There were thin, dark lines on it, like old handwriting. He had not seen that before. By the time he reached his car, he was hungry, and his calves ached, and his face was warm in a way that felt earned. He sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes before he turned the key. He did not check his phone right away. That felt important somehow, like a small experiment. When he finally turned it on, the notifications poured in. He watched them stack. He did not feel the usual jump in his chest. He did not feel free of them either. He just looked at them, and the looking did not pull him under. He drove home. Monday rolled around and, predictably, sucked him right back into the fluorescent lights and spreadsheet hell. He still, sometimes, caught himself moving through his own day the way he had moved through the first half of that trail, with his body in the room and his mind somewhere else entirely. But the suffocating grip around his chest had loosened, just a fraction. Barely enough to notice, but enough to breathe. After work, he started shoving his phone into a drawer for an hour, sometimes longer if he forgot it there. He took walks around his block with nothing in his ears. He was bad at it at first. His mind was loud. He let it be loud, and he kept walking. And after a few weeks, the loudness began to argue with itself less. He thought about the old man more than he expected to. He never saw him again. He went back to that trail twice that summer. The bench was always empty. He sat on it anyway. The body, he figured out later, was the easy part. The body would go where you drove it. The mind took longer. The mind had to be convinced that nothing was on fire, and the mind did not believe you the first time, or the 10th. There was no point entering the forest if his mind was still hiding under the desk. It was a quiet realization, one he understood now in the small, embarrassed way you understand things that were obvious to everyone else. He had spent years getting somewhere. This was the first time in a while he had just been walking.